welcome from Finchley Synagogue, the Kinloss Synagogue here in London, where we are delighted to be joining with our friends and colleagues at Koren Publishers Jerusalem to see some of their innovative and fascinating Haggadot in advance of Pesach. Koren have a tremendous selection of Haggadot and other books, and we're this evening going to be able to meet some of the authors of their most innovative Haggadot, hear about their publications, and see some of the secrets that lie behind them. We're going to start by looking at the Haggadot published by the late Rabbi Sachs and the late Rabbi Steinsaltz, both of whom sadly left us in the past year. And it's very poignant to be recording here in Finchley Synagogue, since it was here that Rabbi Sachs in particular went to Hebrew school, to Seder, when he was a child and began some of the journey of his Jewish learning. So to kick us off, I'm delighted to pass over to Aria Grossman at Koren Publishers, who's also editing and working on videos with us, as well as producing books, and to hear more from Aria.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Leitner, and thank you so much for having us back on US TV. It's really great to be here. As you said, over the course of the next half hour or so, we're going to be hearing from four really excellent authors who are going to be speaking about the Haggadah that they've been a part of, and that have the opportunity to bring really new, exciting and inspirational insights to your Sedarim this year. One idea that I thought of that I actually shared on a recent Koren podcast that we did about preparing for a meaningful Seder was that, and a reference you might appreciate is that I was recently watching the Netflix documentary about Pele. And Pele said that one of the first pieces of advice his father gave him, his father was also a Brazilian footballer known as Dondinho. And Dondinho said to his son Pele, when you get on the pitch, everyone is equal. Everyone on the pitch, doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter your background. On the pitch, everyone's equal. And I think it's so exactly the same at our Seder nights, whether we're spending Seder maybe this year, unfortunately, alone or with one other member of our family, or maybe with a larger family. Whoever comes to the table, we're all equal. And we can all find our own ways to connect to the Seder. And that's why I think it's so beautiful to have such a range of different Haggadot, so that everyone can find their own way of connecting to the Seder. As you mentioned, Rabbi Leitner, we would be remiss if we didn't mention, before we hear from the authors we have joining us, to mention two Haggadot that we have, of course, the Jonathan Sachs Haggadah by the late Rabbi Lord Sachs Zatzal, which is full of his incredible insights into the Haggadah, includes his running commentary to the text of the Haggadah, as well as a selection of essays at the back written by Rabbi Sachs on all different themes of the Haggadah and Pesach, which of course you can hear more about in Rabbi Leitner's series of shiurim of Torah Rabbi Sachs, and shiurim in insights of the Haggadah from the thought of Rabbi Sachs. And of course, as well, we are this year still mourning the loss of our teacher and friend, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz Zatzal, and you can find his insights and commentary in the Passover Haggadah with commentary by Rabbi Adin Even Yisrael Steinsaltz, again, with beautiful Koren layout inside, and Rabbi Steinsaltz's expansions and explanations on the text. So unfortunately, though we don't have these great leaders and scholars with us anymore, we can still bring their Torah to the Seder and have them join us in a way at our Seder tables this year. And without further ado, we'll hear from our four authors who will be talking a bit about their different Haggadot.
Hello, my name is Adam Cohen, and I'm a professor of art history at the University of Toronto, and the proud author of Signs and Wonders, 100 Haggadah Masterpieces, which was published by Koren in 2018. In my book, I tell the story of the history of the illustrated Haggadah, which stretches back into the Middle Ages. You may be familiar with more modern versions, such as the Shek Haggadah or the Moss Haggadah, but I'd like to focus on one of the very earliest illustrated versions, the famous Bird's Head Haggadah, now in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. The Haggadah takes its nickname from the fact that the artist in Germany around the year 1300 decided to represent all the Jews with the heads of birds. Now, why he or she did that is a matter of great debate. Was it perhaps because the artist wanted to avoid representing human beings with human heads and thus perhaps crossing the line of the second commandment, thou shalt have no graven images before you? Was it a way to turn on its head negative Christian stereotypes of Jews? Was it a way for the Jews to express that they weren't just any old bird, but perhaps powerful eagle-like creatures? Or some combination of those possibilities? We don't yet fully know the answer. But what we can say is that in this very early illustrated example, the Bird's Head Haggadah lays down some of the principles of illustrated Passover books that stretch to the present. The book has three kinds of illustrations. The first, as you see here, shows the Jews in the act of performing the Seder rituals. So here, the head of the household holds up a prominent cup, and just above his head is the blessing, Borei Pri Hagafen. A second kind of illustration tells the story of the Exodus from Egypt. So in this picture, we see Moses approaching the Red Sea, leading the Israelites. There's another version of the Bird's Head Haggadah that was published by Koren in a pop-up version. And here we see the same scene of Moses at the Red Sea in this edition, which has literally come to life because if you pull the tab, you see Moses stretching forth his rod, and then, upon pulling the tab, the waters of the Red Sea part, and the children of Israel went on dry land in the midst of the sea. Now, the pop-up version is particularly suitable for children, but it's a delight for people of all ages. And it's not just a fun version of the Haggadah. It has all of the necessary text for one to perform the entire Seder. Now, finally, the Bird's Head Haggadah has a third kind of illustration, a commentary, as it were. Here is the very final page, and it shows 4 Jews on the bottom pointing up to a beautifully rendered Gothic-style structure, and the caption at the top tells us that it is Yerushalayim, the destination, the hoped-for promise of redemption that the Jews desire. And it comes fittingly at the end of the Haggadah, after the words, Lashana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. A fitting end for the Haggadah, and my words to you, I wish everyone a happy and safe holiday, a Chag Sameach, and I encourage you to check out the Koren pop-up edition of the Bird's Head Haggadah, or Signs and Wonders, 100 Haggadah Masterpieces, to read more about the Bird's Head Haggadah and 99 other wonderful versions of the illustrated Haggadah. Thank you.
Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol haleilot. But here's the real question. On all other nights, we read this. But on this night, we read from this. Hi, I'm Jordan B. Gorfinkel. Gorf. I am the veteran editor of Batman Comics and the cartoonist for JewishCartoon.com. And I asked myself a question. How is it that I can combine my passion for Judaism with my love of this unbelievable book, the Passover Haggadah? It has everything you'd want from a graphic novel. It has action, adventure, suspense, history, philosophy, humor, and of course, 4,000 years of Jewish tradition. Well, folks, this is the solution that you've been waiting for. I have partnered with Israeli artist Erez Tzadok and the wonderful gold standard in Jewish publishing, Koren Pub, to create the very first and unique Passover Haggadah graphic novel. For the first time ever, you can bring a comic book to your Pesach Seder, and Bubby can't say that there's anything wrong because this is 100% kosher. It has everything you need in order to be able to celebrate your Pesach Seder. It has the Hebrew, the transliteration, and most excitingly, our brand new contemporary English translation merged with graphic novel sequential illustration so that the entire story is told from beginning to end, no abridgment, everything is there. Plus, we even have all of the rituals explained through illustration as well. So no matter what your age, no matter what your background, no matter what your temperament, you will enjoy the Passover Haggadah graphic novel. You will get excitement, action, adventure, and most of all, you will fulfill your mitzvah, your commandment to Ki'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim, to see yourself as if you right now have come out of slavery to freedom on Passover night through marvelous illustrations in the Passover Haggadah graphic novel. I'm Gorf, and I thank you very much for celebrating with me this Pesach with the Passover Haggadah graphic novel.
Hi, my name is Erica Brown, and I am a professor at George Washington University and the director of the Mayberg Center for Jewish Education and Leadership. I've written 12 books on the Hebrew Bible, spirituality, and leadership, but I have to say my favorite book was writing a commentary on the Haggadah and the collection of essays that I wrote on Tanakh, on the Hebrew Bible, that accompanied the Haggadah. It was just an absolute joy, and I wanted to do something different. I know that people intellectualize this time period. The Haggadah, they read and say Divrei Torah, they share words of Torah and lots of different analysis. But I think there's an emotion that is foundational to the whole experience of Passover, that sense of freedom and liberation and conversation. So I called my Haggadah Seder Talk, a conversationalist Haggadah, and the idea is to have prompts throughout the commentary that ask questions about Jewish identity and memory and family and continuity. And so, and the idea is to take your personal experience and really integrate it with the messages, the larger messages of Passover, which we're supposed to do as we relive this experience. And one of the ways I tried to make the Haggadah different is in my opening. And I just want to read you the opening page because we make a special blessing in the Hebrew month of Nisan and celebrating the birth, the growth of the new buds of the spring. And Passover is called Chag HaAviv, the holiday of the spring. And sometimes we're so busy cleaning and studying and do all these things that we don't actually go outside and say, this is a holiday that captures the spring. And so I open with a long line from Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, which is traditionally read on the Shabbat of Passover. And it's from chapter 2, verses 11 to 13. Look, the winter is past, the rains are over and gone. Flowers appear on the earth. The season of singing has come. The cooing of doves is heard in our land. The fig tree forms its early fruit. The blossoming vines spread their fragrance. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch beautifully said in his collection of writings on Nisan how poor we would be if we had not learned to celebrate the spring. The blessing you make on the tree is, blessed are you, our Lord our God, King of the universe, who has withheld nothing from his world, but has created in it beautiful creatures and trees for human beings to enjoy. And in the annual cycle, we're invited to once again be part of this amazing sense of the world's rebirth. And I close that little section with an excerpt from Chaim Nachman Bialik, one of the poet laureates of Israel, his poem Footsteps of Spring. A different wind is blowing, skies grow tall, bright distances unfold in limpid space. Spring treads the hills, and in the village square the earth at dawn exhales a misty warmth, and budding shoots appear upon wet trees. A different wind is blowing through the world. And I think that's what we should feel on Passover, that a different wind is blowing through the world. Winds of justice and winds of compassion and winds of hospitality and winds of spring. Wishing all of you a happy, and this year especially a healthy and joyous Passover.
Shalom uvracha, my name is Daniel Rose. I'm the author and developer of the Koren Youth Haggadah. I am an educator, educational consultant, a parent of 5 children, and I was lucky enough to be involved in the development of Magamon, Koren Magamon educational series, including Sederim, and most recently this Haggadah. Let me spend a moment telling you what I think is unique about the Haggadah, certainly the educational vision that we built the Haggadah on, and that is 3 core pillars. Number one, and this resonates to parents this year more than any other, parents are educators. That is the expectation in Judaism that we are the primary educator in the lives of our children, and Seder night is our night. We have to step up and take that role on, and it's the most exciting and honored and holy of roles. That's number one. Number two is Seder night is experiential. It's all about experiencing the story rather than just reading it or learning it. This is built into the text of the Haggadah, and we tried very hard to build it into the extra educational elements of the Koren Youth Haggadah. On every page of the Haggadah, there is an activity or an experience that the child can lead all the guests in doing that relates to the text of that page. That's number two. And number three is the centrality of the child on this night. Again, this is no chidush. Everyone knows that the child is at the center of Seder night and at the center of the Haggadah, but we really try to make this Haggadah with the child in mind, the language that we used, the beautiful illustrations that we used, each illustration having its own message and meaning and being a commentary in itself, and also questions on every page. Questions are the order of the night. The Haggadah is built around questions, and that's because we're trying to empower the child in the educational process, and that's really what questions do. When we encourage questions, we encourage the child to set the educational agenda, and that's what we try to do in this Haggadah. Every page also has a question that we can ask the child, or the child can ask us, that can be the trigger for a discussion. Let me share with you one idea that kind of wraps all of that into one. The page of Manish Tana. We have a story. There are stories throughout the Haggadah. Stories are a wonderful experiential way of connecting to an idea. This is a very famous story that Rabbi Sachs would often tell about Isidore Rabi, the Nobel Prize winning physicist, who was once asked why he became a scientist. And he said his mother made him a scientist, because every day he would come home from school, and while all the other mothers in Brooklyn would ask their children, what did they learn today in school? His mother would ask, what question did you ask today in school? Questions is so much about the educational process, and again about empowering the child in that educational process. And that is really what we try to do in this Haggadah. Wishing you all a Chag Kasher v'Sameach.
Well, a massive thank you to all of our presenters. That was really fascinating to get the inside scoop on these Haggadot. And it also shows how Koren are bringing new contemporary meaning to ancient texts, as we have to do in every generation. And just as at the Seder, every year we fulfill the mitzvah Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, of retelling the Exodus from Egypt, we have to do so with fresh eyes, as if we were there ourselves, and to be able, as Aria alluded to at the beginning, to follow the example of Pele's father. I just love that. We're going to use it at our Seder this year. But to be able to see each year the Exodus with fresh eyes, to make us feel as if we were there, which is how we have passed on our story throughout the generations, is the way that we fulfill this important mitzvah. And these wonderful Haggadot that we have seen over the last few minutes are a great way to help us do this. So thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for watching US TV. Thank you again to our friends at Koren for the wonderful work they do, both with us and more broadly for the Jewish community. And I wish you all a wonderful Pesach. Chag Sameach.
And from us also just to thank, as Rabbi Lena said, to our authors, to Dr. Adam Cohen, to Jordan Gorfinkel, to Dr. Erica Brown, and to Dr. Daniel Rose for their contributions and sharing a bit about their Haggadah with us today. And thank you, of course, to our friends and colleagues at the United Synagogue for hosting us on this wonderful event. Wishing you a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Of course, all the Haggadot are available from the Koren website, www.korenpub.com, and all local Jewish bookstores.